As we get started here, we're going to go through some work comp information today, claims information. If you have questions, stop me as we go along because there's no wrong question, and I guarantee you somebody else has either already asked it, wants to ask, or just sure would like to know how to do this, okay? So please stop me and ask questions as we go along through here. We have a lot of cases to go over and a lot of information, but I would rather spend the time working one-on-one with you if you have questions than going over some of these boring slides that Randall made me put in the presentation, okay? All right, let's go ahead and get started here. The first part of workers' compensation, does anybody do work comp records checks before hire? One person. One, anybody else? Two? Three, anybody else? Four, anybody else? These are my friends. So thank you very much, whoever raised your hands. Thank you, thank you, thank you in the back there. These are my friends, my heroes, because these are the people you can go to and ask questions and go, gosh, I had this happen, what do I do? We have a form, and it's in your packet there, and it's the form that looks like this. Everybody get it out. All right. It's the Division of Work Comp Pre-Employment Records Check for I keep saying criminal background, but we're actually doing, we should check that too. But work comp, not a good start. But anyway, so we're going through work comp records checks there. Obviously, this has to be done. You can't have them fill it out with the application and start then. It has to be done post-offer pre-employment. So you do have to go through, interview the person, decide you want to hire them, make the conditional offer to them, and then have the records checked, okay? You can do that. This is done through snail mail, okay? So done through snail mail. It is $5 per check. The employer fills out their portion after the employee fills out theirs. And then there's a nice little section that has to be notarized as well. So if you don't have a notary on staff, you might want to get one before you start doing this. Randall has done an excellent job. I hate to say that. But anyway, sham wow, really? Anyway, he's done an excellent job. And another form that he's provided you looks like this. And it reads Work Comp Records Check at the top. It's got the Connell logo. That one. This is the instructions that Randall has provided to go along with this form from the state. This gives additional information on how to do the form and what you should be doing along with it, okay? You want to read through that. Obviously, you can't just go and start checking work comp backgrounds of employees or future employees without everything in line. The first thing that you have to do is you have to have an accurate job description, and it has to be done in conjunction with physical ability tests, accurate job descriptions, all those good things. Does anybody do physical ability testing? Oh, wow, I have a couple more friends in the room. Yay. So physical ability testing is very, very important, and also a job function analysis. Who has job function analysis for their positions? Okay, a couple more. Great, great, I like that. Job function analyses are really important, aren't they? What do they have in them? Physical demands of the job, essential duties, pretty much. Basically what the job entails, what this person is required to be able to do do the essential functions of this job. A lot of people go through and they go, well, I can do this on my own, right? I can do this, I know what you do. I'll just walk out there, watch you for 10 minutes, and I'll write down what you do, right? How accurate is that going to be? I think Ryan just about fell out of his chair whenever I said that. So probably not real accurate because a 10-minute watch is not going to actually include what the person does. But also, you know, we can write down this person has to lift 50 pounds, right? Well, lifting 50 pounds from the floor is a lot different than lifting 50 pounds from a table, right? How high do they have to lift this? Do they have to carry it? For how long do they have to carry it? That's a big difference in the job. If you just have to take 50 pounds and take it from here to here, that's different than taking 50 pounds and having to carry it all the way across the room, right? Big difference there. I can take 50 pounds and carry it from here to here. Across the room, I might injure myself, right? Big difference there. So you have to make sure excuse me, that the job function analysis is correct and it's done by a correct person, the person who's trained to do this. You might want to hire somebody outside to do it. There's a couple places that are really great. I know there's several in town that do it. Art Physical Therapy works with people on that, Apex, Advantage. There's several places you can use, but you want to make sure that you use an expert in that. And you want to make sure that the person knows what they're doing, they've done it before, and you can even actually reach out to some of their current clients for references and make sure that it's actually a correct analysis of what the job is doing. If it's not an accurate picture of the job, then it's really pointless, right? I worked in a job, at a clerical job. I was there for 6 years. And on my job description, it said lift 50 pounds, and it was like frequently. And I was there for 6 years. I don't think I ever once lifted 50 pounds. Now, how accurate was that, right? Occasionally, I might have to lift one of those boxes of paper. You know, those get kind of heavy. I can't help it. I'm kind of a wuss. But anyway, is that an okay word to say? Okay. Anyway, we're good with it today, right? What happens here stays here. Are we good with that? Okay. So you want to make sure it is correct. Also, when the work comp records check comes back, so you send this off, send it off to the state, you send your $5 with it, they send back something, and they go, oh goodness, this person's had a previous back injury. What do? Well, you can't just say, I'm not going to hire you, right? You wish you could, but we can't do that, right? Because other people have had back injuries before, they've had a shoulder injury, and they do recover. Has anybody ever been injured before and actually recovered? Some kind of injury or whatever? Yeah, probably so. You've gotten better, right? We have to have the doctor look at it, and the doctor is the one who says yes or no, this person can perform the essential functions or the job. It's not you. Anybody here a doctor in the room? No doctors? So unless you're a doctor with the MD behind your name there, you're not going to be the one to say this person can't do the job, right? And I don't want to get into that. Do you guys want to get into that, saying yes or no on this? I don't want my name behind that. So. But you have to make sure that the doctor is the one who says yes or no, this person can or cannot work. Now, it does take, since it is through the snail mail, you cannot fax these in. You have to pay with a check or money order. You can't even use like your company credit card to pay or anything. It's very, very, you know, it's our state, it's the government. Anyway, since it's done that way, it does take a little bit of time to get them back, so it may add a little bit of time to your hiring process. But if you're having high work comp incidences, especially amongst your new hires, isn't spending a few extra days waiting for this result to come back worth it than having a job injury, on-the-job injury within the first week or two? You know, on-the-job injuries within that first week or two are very, very expensive, right? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes, she asked, can you share the work comp information, what we found in the records check with the physician doing the physical? Absolutely, because that physician needs to know what it is that this person's had injured before, and is this going to cause them not to be able to do the job, okay? So yes, you definitely want to share that with the physician there. And it's medical information there, so it shouldn't be any issue sharing that with the physician. Good question. Yes? Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that it has to get notarized, so what I was thinking, or what we've seen in the past is if you don't have a notary on staff, if they take this with them to get notarized, and if they've had a lot of work comp injuries, is that the case where they normally won't come back with it?
You know, I've never been asked that before, Jay. Thank you very much for throwing that unusual question my way, you wonderful Connell employee. To be honest, I don't know. I don't know if they would be able to take that with them. I've never had anybody let them take it with them and then come back with it. Usually they just have a notary on staff. Randall, do you have an answer to that? You think that they would come back? Randall said you'd be surprised how many wouldn't bring it back. So. Mm-hmm. They don't come back? So is that the way you do it? You send them out with it and they notarize it?
But they know that we're checking. They know that we're checking their records.
Okay. So then do they go on to the next test or anything like that, or how do you handle that?
Then they go and they do the range of motion, the screening that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And that's a wonderful baseline if they get injured. Mm-hmm. We know what their range of motion baseline is. And we also have a fit for duty. If they go out on work and come back, they have to do a fit for duty and pass it.
Wonderful.
With that same PT that has all of that baseline information. Mm-hmm. And we've caught, drugs mm-hmm. before. If their blood pressure is too high, they need a drug test, mm-hmm. and they've failed.
Oh,
so, I mean, that pre-test screening is really important part of a hiring, especially when you're doing a physical job.
Mm-hmm. And who do you use?
Well, we are in St. Louis, and we use Excel Sports and Physical Therapy. Mm-hmm. And the PT came in and did a whole, based on our job description and the weights and the job that they have to do. He set up tasks, and they simulate that task.
Very good. So are you using the same physical therapy group that you do for the pre-employment testing as you do for the work comp injuries?
Yes, we do.
And that's because they set the baseline there to see where they should be.
Right, and we want to know that they really are well enough to come back and do those physical requirements.
Mm-hmm. Very good. You know, she gets a gold star by her name, and there you go. Randall's taught her that. Oh, don't tell us that. Oh my goodness. All right. Any questions on this part? All right. One thing we get asked a lot is, what's the difference between a first report of injury or a claim for compensation? Has anybody ever gotten a claim for compensation? You see those come in, and they have like the attorney's name on there and all of that good stuff. Has anybody seen those before when they come in? Does everybody know the difference between a claim for compensation and a first report of injury? This is something I always struggle with, and so it's just a terminology issue there, but we want to make sure that everybody understands the terminology there. First, the report of injury is that someone got injured and they're going to get better, they're going to recover, they're going to go through the therapy process or see the doctor, go to therapy, do whatever they have to do. They may even have to have a surgery or whatever, but they're going to go through the process just like normal. 90% of the claims or the injuries that come in are just handled through a first report of injury, 90% of them. And in fact, in 2013, there was just over 100,000 first report of injuries filed with the state of Missouri. 100,000, okay? Claim for compensation comes in when someone's unhappy. So they want it to be settled by a judge. They're saying, well, I didn't receive the best therapy. My doctor didn't do this. This is what happened. My employer may be shorting me on wages. They're unhappy about something. Whatever the case may be, I know we couldn't ever imagine having an unhappy workers' comp injury, right, person? An injured employee. Has anybody ever had an unhappy injured employee? I'm shocked. Wow. Anyway, yes, people get unhappy, so they go and they file a claim for compensation there. And that's the difference there. In 2013, there was only 13,000 claim for compensations. So big difference there in the numbers, and those are the cases that goes to the judges. Now, we don't have a ton of judges in Missouri, so that could be why the time frame to get to see a judge is out now. It's about 4 months now just to be able to see a judge. So it's kind of ridiculous, and then what happens when you go to see a judge the first time? Do what? They reschedule it, yes, because somebody doesn't show, right? So then not only have we waited 4 months to get in front of a judge for a pre-hearing or whatever the case may be, then an attorney doesn't show. So now we have to wait another 4 months. And then somebody else doesn't show. Now, have you guys ever had the issue where the employee is the one who quit showing up for this and just nobody can reach them anymore? You guys ever had that? What happens then? I can't hear you. Yeah, you have to wait for them there. And in fact, the judges won't even close it the first time the employee doesn't show up. If it was my case, I would be there. But apparently people don't have the same mindset as we all do in this room. So people won't show up for their hearings there, and then we get scheduled for another 4 months and they don't show up, and another 4 months later and they don't show up. So finally it's about 2 years later, going in there every 4 months, and the judge is going to say, gosh, this person must not be interested, and they finally close it or dismiss the case. So that's where they end up at. But it's very, very frustrating. Just to see a judge, we have to wait forever to get in there. Any questions on this? Stop me as we go through. All right. After an injury has occurred, has anybody ever had a work comp injury at their place? Never? Okay, there's only 3 places here who's ever had a work comp injury. I'm very impressed. You guys must be the safest group ever. Wow. The rest of you guys are lying, but we'll talk about that later. All right. And so, after an injury occurs, the state law says employee has 30 days to report the injury. Do you guys know that? Who hangs their hat on that? We shouldn't hang our hat on that, right? Does anybody ever come back? We've had an employee come back. It's one of our clients from Connell there. I love these clients. You guys are great. You guys give us great stories. And I try to change the names to hide the guilty. So anyway, so we have these employees who'll come back, and they were terminated. I know you guys love terminated employees who come back 6 months later and say they were injured on the job. Yeah. Does it ever happen to you? It happens. It happens, and I know it's happened to some of you because you guys have called me. So I know it happens to you all. But anyway, so they were terminated, fired for cause. 6 months later, they come back, and they say they were injured on the job. It's a back injury of some kind or some kind of unusual thing that has happened. It's never anything normal, but they were injured on the job. How many judges stick with the 30-day rule? Never. In Missouri, yes, it's law, but really it's the judges who decide. And this one did go before a judge, and the judge said, well, golly, it may have been 30 days, but they didn't know, so we're going to go ahead and extend it, and it was 9 months later. Very, very frustrating when you deal with that. So don't hang your hat on 30 days. That's what the statute says, but it's what the judges say that really matters, right? All right. After an injury occurs, the employer chooses the physician. You guys choose your own physician. You all have designated physicians you work with, right? Please tell me you do. I had an employer call, and the injury apparently happened on a Saturday. Randall told everybody I worked on Saturdays. I don't. So anyway. So they called me on Monday morning, and they said, well, we had this young guy get injured, and he's about 20 years old. Now, I love working with 20-year-olds who are injured because mama gets involved. So you end up dealing with mamas. Anybody ever had mama? Yeah? Raising hands there? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So mama gets involved. So this kid was injured, working down here in Branson. Well, mama lives up north of Lebanon, all right? Well, mama insisted that he go to her doctor, okay? And the employer, the supervisor on staff goes, sure, why not? I think we'll do that. Yeah, go see that doctor on a Saturday, okay? So he drives all the way up to Lebanon and sees that doctor. On Monday morning, they call me and say they have an injury, and we're just going to go ahead and let him be handled out of that Lebanon office there. Absolutely not. Why not? You choose the physician. The physician was not trained in work comp. The physician had no idea anything about work comp. The physician had already wrote a note putting this guy off for quite some time. And do we really, really want to pay mileage too? There's good physicians here. Why can't they be seen here in Branson? So on top of everything else, the expense of having the wrong doctor involved, everything else, we're going to have to also have them drive up to Lebanon and pay mileage. That's just ridiculous, isn't it? And then we have mama involved, and she called. She was very unhappy. She's like, yes, my son was injured on the job, and I'm going to choose the doctor. And I said, is your son 18 years of age? Why, yes, he is. He's 20. Well, then I can really only talk to your son about it, but really, you know, the employer gets to choose in Missouri, but, you know, your son is more than welcome to talk to his employer about it and go through that. But when mama calls, it's kind of hard, you know, I'm a mom. Anybody else a mom? I have one boy, he's 13. I feel sorry for any girlfriend he's ever going to have. My future daughter-in-law, I'm literally praying for her now because I'm not going to be the best. I'm going to try really, really hard, but let's face it, you know, we're very, very protective of our boys, right? Very, very protective. So she's very, very protective of her boy, and I get that, but we also have to think of the employer, the cost. The employer chooses the physician. You choose the physician that specializes in work comp because they're going to say, you know what, this person may be injured, but they can get back to work, and here's their restrictions. This way we can get them back to work very, very quickly there. The physician chooses the care. I don't know how many of you all, yes, I'm looking around this room, I see the guilty, I won't say who, have called me and go, well, the physician wants an MRI. They don't need an MRI, they're fine. We shouldn't approve that. You tell that adjuster not to approve that. I think I asked at the beginning if anybody here was a doctor in the room, and I didn't see any hands raised, so unless somebody lied, there's no doctors in this room. So you are not the doctor. The physician chooses the care. If they order the MRI, if they order testing, if they order physical therapy, whatever they do, you know, you chose the physician. They choose the care, and you have to remember that sometimes. And sometimes as the employer, we get frustrated. You are more than welcome, and we encourage you to talk to the physician about the care. And talk to the nurses. Usually the nurses are the one who handles most of the work anyway. We all know that. But talk to them about the care they receive and talk to them about the care they're ordering for your employee, right? You're more than welcome to do that, and please do that. You want to have that open communication going on with them. But at the end of the day, you're not the doctor. They're the doctor, so we have to remember that. Anybody ever had an employee decline treatment? Yeah. Sometimes we do silly things. We fall, whatever, and we're fine. We decline treatment there. So people who know me well know that I have a husband who's very accident prone. I love him dearly, but we've been married 20 years, and we've spent several nights in the ER with him. So anyway, he's kind of accident prone. In fact, most people who see him, he wears a hat most of the times. Anybody have a husband who wears a hat or something? Anyway, he's a country guy, so he's going to wear a hat all the time and everything else. He wears it for two reasons. Number one, he's pretty bald, and number two, his head is deformed. And it's because he's had so many accidents. And people who've seen him without his hat, they're like, oh, okay. So anyway, and you have to kind of look at it to notice. And anyway, I'm telling the truth here, okay? Anyway, so he's at work one day, and he's a welder there in Springfield. And he comes out of his unit that he was welding there, comes out of it, and he's like been leaning into it to weld, you know? And he comes out of it and hits his head on the way up, and so he got this big cut across his head. So he comes home from work that day and takes off his hat, and I'm looking, and I go, dear? He goes, yeah. I said, why do we have duct tape on your forehead? He goes, well, it's another story. He said, I cut my head at work today. And I said, okay. And he said, that's my Band-Aid. I'm like, Okay, he'd taken a piece of paper towel and like folded it up and stuck it underneath. He said I couldn't find a Band-Aid in the first aid kit at work. So anyway, so he's like, yeah. He said they wanted me to go get stitches. And I was like, okay. So we doctored it up a little bit better and sanitized it and everything. He did heal for it there, but there again, he declined treatment whenever he could have gotten treatment for that. But people do that. The best thing to do is make sure that they sign off on it. Does anybody have a medical declination form? Yay, I see a couple of hands raised. Medical declination form. Have them sign off saying that they are declining treatment at this time, but they know that if in the future they decide they need treatment, they are to follow the company's rules on that. What this avoids is those 2 a.m. doctor's visits or ER visits, okay? Because what happens is they fall, they injure their hip, they're all right. The only thing that's hurt that they think at the time is their pride. In the middle of the night, their hip starts hurting. They could probably take some Tylenol or whatever and get over it until morning time, but their wife is with them. And she's going, I told you you need to turn that in. You need to go to the ER right now. Right now you need to go. I'll take you right now. And she goes out and she's warming up the car, all right? And he's going, all right, dear, yes, dear, just a minute, dear. And out the door he goes. And next thing you know, you have an ER bill, right? Have them sign off saying they're going to follow the policies. And this way we can avoid those ER visits right from the beginning, right? She said that this happens all the time. The employee didn't report the injury. It happened on Wednesday. Come Friday night, he's at the ER. So she's questioning. She said, we didn't pay the medical bills. We denied it. Are we doing the right thing? But we took care of him afterwards, but we denied that ER bill. Absolutely. If it is not considered emergency care, they did not report the injury, then you're absolutely doing the right thing there. Yes, you've done good. Proud of you. Another gold star person. I should bring gold stars next time or something, things that glitter. So anyway, put that on the suggestions for next time. Diamonds, ooh. Yeah, Connell's got the money, right? We also want to make sure that they sent for a post-accident drug screen. Even if they aren't injured and they're declining the treatment, you can send them for a post-accident drug screen. They could have sent my husband for one. He'd have passed. He drinks coffee, tea, a beer on the weekends. That's about as exciting as he gets. But, you certainly can send him for a post-accident drug screen, and I certainly would if I suspected the person was a user, okay? All right. Does anybody ever go to the appointment with the employee? You drive their employee there? Yes. Anybody else? 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. 6 or 7, 8. Okay. So we've got several people back there who will take their employee to the doctor. Well, I had an employer who, and I love you guys, I really, really do, but I had an employer who goes along, and their policy is that the employer goes to every doctor's appointment. They don't go to the physical therapy, but if it's a doctor's appointment, that employer is with them, which is great. So this employee was pretty badly injured there, not horribly, bad enough that they needed to go to the ER. So they go to the ER there, and they're starting the triage and everything like that, and the employee had to take off some clothing items. He had to go naked, and the employer did not step out of the room, okay? Tip of the day, step out of the room when the employee has to take their clothes off. It kind of sets that awkward moment a little later on, okay? So the employer calls me the next day, and he goes, well, this employee is really upset with me. Well, duh. I don't want to be seen naked by my employer, and I certainly don't want to see them naked. So I said, why don't you pull down your pants in front of them? This way you're equal. So anyway, use some common sense if you go with the employer, okay? All right. Any questions on this? All right. Post-accident drug screens. Does anybody do post-accident drug screening? Oh, I love you guys. Yay. Post-accident drug screening, very, very important part of the process here. First of all, you need to make sure if you are doing it that you do have a policy on it. If you're not doing it, you need to start doing it, get a policy on it, and start doing it. Post-accident drug screening is really, really important on it. You do have to give the employees, if you aren't doing it, you have to give the employees in writing 60 days notice that you're going to start, give them time to get clean. So anyways, you're going to start doing, I know it's state law, I'm sorry. Anyway, so you do have to give it to them in writing. It's a good idea to have a policy, have them sign off on it, make sure it's in the employee handbook. Does everybody have an employee handbook? Yay, if you don't, Lynette Weatherford sits right back there. Lynette, raise your hand. She would love to help you with that. She's great at those. So anyway, make sure you do have an employee handbook, make sure it's in the handbook, make sure it's in the policy, you're signing off on it, and then make sure you actually do it. We had this company that was one of the Connell clients. I just love you guys. You guys can be great examples. So this company was way down in southwest Missouri somewhere. I don't know the name of town, way down there. Anyway, so they ran a sawmill there. And they didn't have a drug policy there, and they kept having work comp injuries. And I was like, let's go ahead and get this drug policy going through there. And like day number, I don't know, 62, 63, so they were able to actually do this now, okay? They had this employee come in and running saws, mind you, okay? Running sawmills and stuff like that. So doing very dangerous work there, okay? So he comes in, and he's not even there an hour, okay? And he gets his hand, like part of his hand here cut off. Actually, I think it was this part, like this way is how it actually ended up getting cut off there. So he lost his thumb, first finger, second finger, and most of his third, okay? Bam, they're gone. They can't be put back on, okay? So they're gone. They sent him in for emergency surgery, everything else. Come to find out, this guy was high. He was really high, higher than a kite. Yes, Randall, I'm still using that term, okay? Higher than a kite he was. You guys know what that means. He was so whacked out on meth, I'm not sure he knew his name, okay? I'm not sure how he drove to work that day or anything, but he was really, really high on meth. What ended up happening with that claim is because the employer had authorized the treatment to begin with, they had to pay the $23,000 for initial surgery, but after that, they denied the entire rest of the claim. So this guy lost most of his hand, okay? And obviously, he's not exactly, an overly skilled worker, so he's finding other work is going to be very, very difficult for him. I do feel bad on that respect, but he did lose most of his hand. He's not going to get a settlement out of it. He's not getting anything else because his numbers were so obviously off the chart high with meth. So they got out of paying a huge claim. Yes, they had to pay $23,000, the insurance company did, but it could have been much, much worse on that, right? Because they had a drug screening policy. So you want to make sure, even though you may not deal with saw blades and everything else, unusual things happen. So you want to make sure that you are protected with that drug screening policy. Any questions on that? Yes.
Do we have to give them notice?
If you have a drug screening policy, is it in place already that says you can do post-accident and all that good stuff? Random. Should probably include post-accident in there. Change it to include post-accident. And this way, if they are causing accidents there in the workplace, you can drug screen them even if they don't cause an injury or get injured there. Also, if two people are involved in an accident there, one is injured but the other is not, both people can be drug screened. But you need to make sure it says post-accident in there. This way you're covered just in case. So change your policy there and you're good. Anything else? All right, good questions. Oh, this is a good scenario. We get asked this a lot, so here goes. Our company physician said our employee's carpal tunnel was not work-related, which that happens. Not every case of carpal tunnel is work-related, by the way. So we refused to authorize any additional medical treatment. So they're done, okay? The employee then obtained an attorney and went to a different doctor who said it was carpal tunnel and it was work-related, okay? So definitely work-related there. The judge agreed with the employee and we had to pay for the unauthorized medical treatment, including surgery and time away from work. Can we do anything to prevent this from happening again? Has that ever happened? Ever happened to you? Everybody's like, yes, but I'm not saying. I won't speak about this. It does happen. It does happen a lot, okay? And what happens is my first question, whenever this scenario hit my desk here the other day from Randall, my first thought was, well, if the company physician said it was not work-related, why didn't we get a second opinion? Right? We always get a second opinion in cases like that. Always get a second opinion. Write that down. It's really important. Get a second opinion in cases like that, okay? And, doctors sometimes may not always want to override another physician, especially if they're in the same health system. In Springfield, we have two. In this area, we have two major ones. So if you send them to one health system, an option is to send them to the other health system. This way you have two different doctors from two different health systems saying the same thing. But then I get questions like, well, what if the second doctor says it is work-related? Uh-oh, now we got a problem, right? We have one doctor saying it's not, one doctor saying it is work-related. What do? I heard it. Do what? We get a third. You can get a third opinion if you need to, okay? If the second doctor doesn't agree with the first doctor, you go get a third opinion, all right? And that's the way it has to work. Sure can. Yeah, you can tell the doctors if you've had previous screenings and you just want to verify. It just depends on how much the communication you have there with the doctor, but I would tell them. All right. Let's see here. Oh, has anybody ever had this happen? I had this employee, this is, again, another Connell client there, a bus driver down here in this area, okay? So anybody ever have the buses? This was the shuttle person. He drove across country there. So he was a bus driver, okay? So he gets out of his bus and he's unloading luggage for people. And this is an older gentleman, okay? He's like in his upper 70s, okay? But he's driving these big buses across country there. He gets out of the bus, everything is fine. He's turning around, he's getting the luggage. the luggage for people, and he turns around, slips, and falls off the curb, okay? Breaks, or injures his arm, okay? His upper arm there. He goes to the ER where he's at there, finishes that day, goes to the ER, and so he's like, okay. The ER says he's fine. The ER says nothing's wrong with him, he can go back to work full duty, all right? He drives the bus back here, he's in a lot of pain. He tells his employer, I'm not fine, something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong. So they call me and they go, what do we do? And I said, well, send him for another opinion. Okay, so they call the employee and they go, all right, we're gonna send you for another opinion. Locally, here you go, we'll set you up at this place here. The employee's a little stubborn. Does anybody have anybody who's stubborn working for them? Stubborn, yeah. A stubborn mule, that kind of, is that bloodline in the Ozarks here or what? So anyway, a stubborn mule syndrome. Anyway, so he goes, I don't want a second opinion. I just want to get better, and I don't want to work in the meantime. So he's calling in all these days and everything like that, because he really, he believes that the ER was right, but he doesn't know why he's hurting, okay? So he's missing days repeatedly, and he's very, very frustrated. And he's so frustrated that the employer's like, would you just call Sonny and deal with her directly? The employer didn't want to deal with him anymore because he's just frustrated. So I get a hold of him, and I'm like, hey, you know what, man? Go get your second opinion. He's like, I don't want to go back to the doctor. They told me it was fine the first time. So weeks later, this happened for like 3 weeks, this went on, okay? Finally, he goes back for a second opinion because I'm talking to him. I've talked to his wife, is who I ended up talking to, okay? Get her to say he needs to go back for a second opinion. Of course, you know, women, we encourage our spouses to do the right thing, right? So anyway, she drug him up there. He gets a second opinion only to find out that his arm was broken, okay? Now then, the question is those lost wages. He was off for like 3 weeks time frame. He thought he deserved those wages back. He thought he should get paid for that. Should he have? No. The employer did everything right. They offered that second opinion. It's not their fault he refused, right? They did everything right. They never had to pay him for those 3 weeks that he was off work. He was very, very frustrated with that because he was like, well, my bills are coming in. And I'm like, you know, either you go to work because you were excused or you go for a second opinion. And I just kept telling him, these are your choices, you know. And so, no, they were never held responsible for all of those lost wages there because the employer handled it absolutely right. I was proud of that employer that day. So, all right, any questions? You guys are doing great. Okay, are all injuries that occur on the job workers' comp, are they? No, thank you. I see somebody back there shaking his head. Oh, that's the guy from NPR. Well, no wonder he's saying no. All right, slip, trips, and falls in the parking lot. We get asked that all the time. Yes, wintertime comes every year. It's kind of an amazing season that happens. It happens every year at the same time, and so but every year we still get the call. Somebody has slipped, tripped, or fallen in the parking lot, fell in the parking lot on ice or snow or whatever the case may be. Is it workers' comp? You tell me, is it workers' comp? It depends upon who controls the lot. Now, if you are on the employer's lot, you own the lot. This is your lot. You are responsible for cleaning it, making sure it's safe for people to walk across, everything like that. Yes, you would want it covered under workers' comp. Okay, if it's not your lot, say you're working in a strip mall or in the mall or wherever the case may be, and it's not your parking lot, you do not control how that lot is cleaned, taken care of, you do not want it to be workers' comp, you want it to fall on their general liability. Why don't you want it on your general liability? Because under work comp, you can keep the cost controlled. All right, work comp has limitations, everything else. If you put it under general liability, the case can get ridiculously out of hand, taking, you know, lots and lots of dollars spent. You want it to fall under your work comp. All right, so that's why you would say, yes, if it's on your lot, then it's work comp. If it's somebody else's lot, it's not. Okay? So I know it kind of gets confusing there, but that's the way it works with slip, trips, and falls in the parking lot. What if you're just walking along and fall? You ever had that happen? Yes? No, but everybody's going, it wasn't me. No, that wasn't me that did that. You know, they walk along, they fall, it happens. Is that work comp? It could be, it may or may not be. It really, really depends. If there was nothing on the floor was dry. It wasn't slick, it wasn't oily, it wasn't wet. There was nothing on the floor. There was no mouse cord, not a piece of paper on the floor. Nothing they could have fallen over. Nobody stuck their foot out, made them trip. Nothing, okay? They were just walking along and fell. Is that work comp? Maybe not. In Missouri, we have equal exposure. If this could have happened at home, it could have happened at home just as easily as it happened here at work. It may not be work comp. Okay, so don't take it as work comp just because it happened at work. They take pictures immediately, get witnesses. If there was witnesses around, this person was just walking along and fell. If I'm just walking along here and fell, there's nothing on this carpet to make me fall. I'm just a big klutz, right? But if there was something there, then that would make it different. So we have to take all the factors into consideration, get witnesses, get pictures. Yes? Oh, that's a really tough one. How would you say on that one? She said that she has an employee, it's raining outside. He walks in, they have a mat for people to dry their shoes on, and of course, sometimes stubborn mule syndrome comes in place, and we don't want to dry our shoes because it's uncool. So he doesn't dry his shoes. He walks across the floor, it's wet, walks up to the stairs, doesn't grab a hold of the guardrail, and falls on the stairs because his feet are wet. Is that work comp? I would actually talk to my adjuster about that, but what would you say on that, Randall? Randall said ask for a safety penalty, but it's probably going to be work comp, because there was something on the floor there, the water, even though Goofball didn't, wipe his feet. So goofball, is that another word we could say? Okay, we're good with that. All right, so text neck. Has anybody heard of this yet? This is kind of cool. All right, the younger generation, some of us older folks, they walk along like this all day long. Have you guys ever done that? You've seen people do that and they walk into things and they look really stupid? Yeah. My son does that, bless his heart. Anyway, it's actually causing something called text neck. And it's the curvature of their neck is actually bending the wrong way now because they spent so long doing this number. That's actually causing a problem there. So we have to be careful in those pre-employment testings that we do, Ryan. We'll catch things like that. They're going to look for things like the curvature of the spine and curvature of the neck, that kind of thing there. So if they do have text neck and they develop it, so they're in the job and they're in the office there, their job is to work on a computer, but they look up, they look this way, that's probably not going to cause text neck, right? But if they're doing this number all the time, so they come to work and they say, my neck hurts, it must be because of my job. It may not be. It may be because they're doing this number all the time at home, right? So it may or may not be work comp, but I'm going to doubt work comp on that. But you still have to look at it there. So be aware of all these scenarios that come into play. Heat stroke. We get asked this a lot. Someone had a heat stroke at work. Is it work related? Is it work comp? And the room goes quiet. Maybe, maybe not.
Does
right?
it depend on the job?
It depends on the job, depends upon the person, about what they're doing there. As I said earlier, my husband's a welder. This time of year, welders stink. They come home, they smell. Because, you can't have like moving air around around the welding department there because the welds will mess up. So you can't have a lot of moving air there. They're climbing inside units there and they're doing welding and they're coming out and they're all sweaty and drippy and everything else, right? Now then, if it's 10 minutes into the shift, someone has a heat stroke, it's probably not work related, right? Right? Right, thank you. So it may not be work related if it's 10 minutes into the shift, but if it's later on in the day, maybe, maybe not. How healthy is this person? Is this person taking care of themselves? I can tell you this time of year, my husband drinks water all the time. You have to drink a ton of water. You have to hydrate. You have to take care of yourself. Is it work related if they have a heat stroke? Maybe, maybe not. It really depends. 10 minutes into the shift, probably not. Later on the day, maybe. It just really depends. But it also depends upon the health of the person. If someone falls in the bathroom, has anybody ever had an employee fall in the bathroom? Yes. Those questions get asked. Oh my gosh, these are a mess whenever they fall in the bathroom. First of all, I'm like, what were you doing that you fell in the bathroom? Anyway, I don't know. People get creative in there. I don't know. Anyway, so I had this employee she was actually off shift. Okay, she had clocked out. She decided to go to the bathroom on the way out. So she goes into the bathroom there, does her business. She's washing her hands, and somehow she pulled on the sink just enough for the sink to fall off, hit the floor. She fell with it and broke out her front teeth. Yeah, you guys are like, these things happen. It was not ruled work comp because she was after her shift, okay? So they had to go back on her general liability is what they went back to there. But first of all, I'm going, how hard was she pulling on the bathroom sink? What are you doing in there, So anyway, but she was on her way home. She had clocked out for the day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it went back on their general liability. Mm-hmm. That's what that one happened. Yes? Footwear. That's a really, really good point there. Having your employees, he asked about how important is footwear. Having your employees wearing the proper footwear in the job. One of the most expensive claims we had was an employee who was showing houses, high-end houses, and of course they all have these tall stairways because everybody wants the vaulted ceilings and everything else. So she was walking up stairways there showing houses. She had on like 3-inch heels, big, tall heels. Anyway, and she fell down the stairs. Now, does she really need 3-inch heels to walk up and down those stairs all the time? I'm not a heel wearer anyway, but If you are and you're doing stairs all the time, that may not be the smartest shoe to wear, right? But the employer should have caught that in advance and goes, you know what, I understand these are pretty, but you're gonna be going up and down stairs all day. We really need you to wear a lower heel or something more practical for what you're doing there. If you have an area that are slip, trips, and fall area, the food areas there, particularly like the restaurants, that type of thing, you know, those non-slip shoes are great to have. It's also a great idea to reimburse your employees for them, help them buy those because those are not cheap. So, but encourage them to have it. If you can even make a safety rule that they have to have on non-slip shoes. This way, if they don't have them on, they become injured. Then you know you can get a safety reduction for that. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But non-slip shoes are helpful. Steel-toed shoes are helpful if you're working in the manufacturing environment. Steel-toed shoes is something you really, really want to encourage there because a lot of toes get lost very, very quickly. Good question. Light duty work. The best way to reduce the claim is to get people back to work, right? Who here offers light duty work? Oh, yay, look at all you guys, yay. And light duty work is fun, right? You guys like finding light duty work for people, right? Yay. Am I the only nerd in the room besides Randall? Okay. Oh, there's another nerd back there. I see raising, oh, there he is, yes, you don't count. All right, so light duty work is very important. You want to get your employees back to work, obviously, very, very quickly. It reduces the cost of the claim, keeps it medical. If you can do it in 3 days, get them right back to work there. But there's lots and lots of options with light duty work. You know, you can obviously have them work for you, doing light duty work, doing work there on the job there. But you can also send them for nonprofits. Anybody have their employees go to nonprofit organizations? Where do you send them? The kitchen's a great place. Good job there. Thrift stores, there's all sorts of places that you can send. There are nonprofits. You can have your employees work in there, work closely with that nonprofit to make sure they're doing a good job for them. So long as the nonprofit can meet their work restrictions, absolutely, get them back to work there. And you know, have them wear your company shirt too, so it puts a good name that, hey, this company's supporting this nonprofit, okay? And choose a nonprofit that means something to you or to the owner or something, so kind of puts an extra benefit in there. While they're, if you get them back to work also, they don't have to pay temporary partial disability benefits, right? So they're not getting paid to sit at home and play with the remote control or, you know, be on Facebook all day long or anything like that. So if you get them right back to work, then we don't have to pay those benefits. Has anybody ever had anybody refuse light duty? Ooh, yes. What'd you guys do? They get points? And what'd you guys do whenever they refused light duty? I think it was you, wasn't it? You terminated them? Okay. You know, when an employee refuses light duty, the way it works is if you offer them light duty and they refuse it, if you're doing it verbally over the phone, you're calling them at home and saying, hey, you know, we've got light duty work for you. We need you back in here tomorrow. The doctor has released you. We've got something to do, something you could do within your restrictions. You call them, have a witness on that conversation there. This way, if they say, well, I'm not doing light duty work, I'm not going to do that, you can say, you know what, that's absolutely fine. We're not going to make you do light duty work. That's not, that's not our thing to do. You know, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. We're not going to make you do it. But here's the deal. When you're gone and you refuse light duty work, we are not going to pay you your disability payments while you're out, your 2/3 of your wages. We do not have to pay you those wages. We have offered you light duty work. You have refused it, and we're not going to pay you for it. We usually, people will call us and say, this person's refused light duty. I'm mad at him anyway. They've already had a claim. You might ever get mad at somebody who's had the claim. You guys giggle, but I guarantee you some of you all have called me. Yes, you have. I'm protecting the guilty here, but I don't like this person anyway. We were going to fire him. Let's fire him now. Really? Well, now they're refusing light duty work. Can you fire him? We certainly do not recommend that. That can get you in some trouble there because you're really kind of letting them go for having a work comp injury, okay? So we don't recommend we fire for refusing light duty work. So I had an employer here in the Ozarks here. I love you guys. You guys are great. And they had an employee who got injured in the shoulder, okay? It was a shoulder injury. I think it was a rotator cuff or something like that. It was just a shoulder injury. So anyway, this person was a driver, and a driver of dump trucks, okay? But they always had someone else in the truck with them, okay? So did he need to drive all the time? The other person could have drove too, right? Okay, so we took that out of that equation there. But this person drove the dump trucks there, and the employer was like, they were mad because they had an injury. And they were like, this person's injured, I'm so mad, I just want to fire him. I'm like, well, we really don't recommend doing that, but if you want to, I'd recommend talking to an employment attorney first. But so they were like, fine, we won't fire him, but we're not going to give him light duty. Woo, what punishment? Gee, let's let him sit home and get 2/3 of their wages. Really, woo, I'd like to work for you. So anyway, So then they called me a few months later, and this employee's still off work. He had to have rotator cuff surgery. He's still off work. He's getting physical therapy. And they were like, we don't want to pay him anymore. Well, have you offered him light duty work? No. Well, are you planning on it? No. I'm like, okay, so what are you calling me for? Well, we want this claim to go away. We want it to be done. No, it's probably not going to happen. So the employee starts getting therapy. Well, in the meantime, a couple months after that, this thing's going on forever. The employer calls and he's all mad and he's like, well, I think that this employee is become an alcoholic. I'm like, I would too if I worked for you, but you know. Anyway, so he's become an alcoholic. I think he is pulling transmissions and doing odd jobs on the side at his house. Okay. Well, what do you want us to do about it? I'm like, well, have you talked to your adjuster? Yeah. I'm like, okay, so are they going to assign surveillance? Yeah, they're going to assign surveillance. I'm like, okay, that's great. That's great. They can go ahead and do that there. Well, what do I do? And I said, well, you know, here's the deal. Maybe if you would have gotten him back to work and offered him light duty, he wouldn't have time or energy to be doing work on the side for you. And he's like, well, now he's an alcoholic. He couldn't come to work if he wanted to. I was like, well, then offer him light duty and let's see what happens. Well, we don't want to do that. Okay, fine, whatever. A couple months later, he still calls. By this point in time, I get kind of frustrated. He calls, and he's like, well, we did the surveillance. I'm like, okay, well, how did that go? Well, the surveillance guy got caught. It's a tiny town. Of course he's going to get caught. Anyway, so he got caught. So the employee, of course, faked it up pretty good. But I know he's sitting at home and he's drinking beer and people are letting him do his transmission work. I'm like, okay, have you offered him light duty yet? Well, no. I don't think he has a car anymore. He probably couldn't get to work. Is that your problem? No. We don't care if they can't get to work. That's not your problem, okay? I said, well, did you offer him light duty work? No. Are you going to? No. Okay, well, that's how I left it, and I handed that client back to the producer, who's smiling at me because he knows who that is. Anyway, handed it back to the producer. I said, don't have him call me no more. Seriously, let's think about this. The employee's sitting at home, drawing 2/3 of their wages. What encouragement are we giving them to come back to work by doing that? Nothing. So we need to get them back to work as quickly as possible. Any questions on that? No. All right, surveillance. Does surveillance really work? Tim Brenner's back there going, yes, yes, it does. Actually, it does work in some cases. It doesn't work in others. Obviously, if they get caught, it doesn't work real well. I live in a small town. Does anybody here live in a really, really small town? Tiny little town there. It's hard to do surveillance in those little bitty towns, isn't it? We've had a rash of thefts in our town. Oh, I get so frustrated about thieving. But anyway, we've had a rash of thefts in our town, so as a community, as a neighbor, we kind of get together with our neighbors and we're like, okay, we kind of watch out for each other's things or whatever. So if we see an unusual person come around, we don't greet them nicely. And the neighbors will call and tell you somebody was there and watching you and that kind of stuff. We kind of stick together. So small towns are really, really hard to do surveillance on. And as I was explaining to Mr. Brenner back there in the back, sometimes we in small towns, we don't use binoculars to see things far away. We might use the scope of a gun. And so when somebody's watching us, we're doing this number, watching them back. It kind of gets scary. So surveillance does work, though, okay? The trick with surveillance is that you do have to have a couple of days in a row. It has to be very, very well documented, and it has to be at least 2 days in a row of them doing this. So say you're watching somebody, the surveillance person catches somebody moving, they're moving their brother-in-law up and down 3 flights of stairs in and out of an apartment there, and they're carrying couches and refrigerators and everything else, but they're out for a serious back injury, right? They can't work, they're in so much pain, okay? So the surveillance person catches them do that for 1 day. 1 day is fine, but the next day they don't catch them doing anything unusual, okay? Well, what they can say is they go to the judge and they go, yes, I did do that 1 day, but the next day I was in so much pain, I was in bed for the next 3 days. I realized I thought I was better, I wasn't, blah, blah, blah. So the judges will always go with the employee. They just do. They're more employee friendly here, okay? But then they also see him, a different case. They see him and they're catching him. They're moving their brother-in-law's furniture up and down the 3 flights of stairs, carrying the refrigerator and the couch and all the good heavy stuff. But the next day, they're jumping on a trampoline. Let's see, they're doing jumps off a trampoline. They land on the diving board, cartwheel off of that, and do a perfect swan dive into the pool. That's a better case, isn't it? Because not only did they do it 1 day, but the next day they're doing all these wonderful events that, I mean, let's face it, most of us couldn't do. So anyway, so that would be a good case of where surveillance worked well, okay? I had a friend of mine. He was injured in a car accident through work comp, and he had to have his leg amputated right below the knee, I believe. No, just above the knee. I'm sorry, just above the knee. Anyway, and he was saying he couldn't work again. He was off and on work comp. It's kind of a mess of a story there, but anyway, off and on work comp. Well, he was the coach of our softball team, our co-ed softball team, and the surveillance people caught him playing softball. So, but he couldn't work at all. So, needless to say, he had to pay back some money there, and he got in a little bit of trouble, okay? So, you never know what surveillance might catch. Safety devices and safety training. Does anybody put safety policies in writing? A couple people, several people, great, great. Does anybody have employees sign off on them when they get safety training? Yes, yes, wonderful people, yay. All right, that is the best way to get the safety reduction. Obviously, if someone's injured in an accident and they're violation of safety rules, then you know that's a problem. And so, but it's even more so of a problem if the employer doesn't have any documentation that they ever trained them on it. Let me give you an example. Back in my younger days, back in the, oh gosh, mid-90s, I was 4. So I was working in a plant in Stratford, in an industrial plant there, and we did sheet metal fabrication. Has anybody worked in sheet metal fabrication there? You have the great big presses. Oh, I see a hand back there. So you know what I'm talking about, the great big presses, and you hear the thudding all day long. Well, I worked back in the assembly area there, but one day I thought, I need to go get a drink. It's kind of warm. So I'm walking up there, and I'm walking to the drinking fountain there, and I'm going, mind you, I'm young and dumb back then, really dumb. Anyway, so I'm walking along, I'm going, wow, somebody spilled red paint. And I'm like, and boy, they made a mess. Somebody's going to get in trouble. They didn't clean up their mess. So I'm walking along up there. I'm stepping over it to go to the drinking fountain because, again, I'm young and dumb. I go up there and get a drinking fountain and turn around, and that's whenever I see, oh, wow. There's a person standing over there and a couple guys around him with his arm wrapped up in this towel-type contraption because he had actually taken, why, I don't know, but he had taken the big presses. Now, these things come down, and they power down. They make this big, loud thud, and they, like, vibrate the ground, and they're bending and forming metal, big sheets of metal, okay, is what they're doing there. And he decided there was something stuck back in there, so instead of shutting the machine off, okay, he sticks his arm in there, okay? So what was left on the machine was this part of his arm, okay, all the muscle and everything that, and he was down to the bone in here, okay? It didn't get the bone, but did get that part of his arm there. And so they were holding his arm up there before the ambulance came. But there again, safety violation. Back in the 90s, we didn't have anything in writing, that kind of thing, so it was just kind of a duh, don't do this type of thing again. But the guy probably wishes he wouldn't have done it to begin with, right? So we'd get kind of lazy sometimes in our safety. So I had actually been working in assembly, and I worked a rivet machine. Has anybody worked a rivet machine? Some of you guys, maybe. You hold your parts up there, and you hold two pieces of metal together, and they put a rivet between them. They're there to hold them together, and you like hold them between this machine. You have like these guards and stuff like that in the way. I had always taken my guard out of the way, and that's the way everybody did it. After seeing that, I went back there and dropped that guard back down and started running that machine there. So I like going home with all my fingers and toes attached. So safety is very, very important. You got to have a safety policy. You got to have it in writing, and you got to enforce it. If you don't enforce it, it doesn't matter. You can have it in writing all day long. If you have it in writing that you're supposed to wear your safety glasses, but nobody wears them, not even the supervisors, and nobody's ever in trouble for them, big deal, okay? If you have the safety policies in place, you can get up to 25 to 50% reduction on your claim. That's the important part of it. People ask me all the time, do I have to pay for stupid? Yes. Sometimes you do. We had an employee, same place, and I love guys, but sometimes guys aren't real smart whenever it comes to doing things. So we had this, when I ran the rivet machine, sometimes the rivets would go down and they'd be crooked, okay? Sometimes, you know, they'd drop down into place and you'd be going so fast long you wouldn't notice the part would be crooked there. So they'd come in, they'd lay crooked, the rivet would, so you wouldn't be able to use that part until you drilled out the rivet. So some of the guys got in a hurry there. Now picture this. Let me stand back here so you guys can see a little bit maybe. So this guy is drilling. He's taking this part and he's holding it here, okay? Yeah, and the guys are already like, oh, this is trouble. He's holding it here and he's drilling it there because he doesn't want to walk all the way to the table and do it. He's drilling it there. It goes through. It goes all the way through, gentlemen. Yeah. Anyway, it hurts a certain part. Anyway, and you know, I've been in the labor delivery room with a woman who didn't have medication, and the man screamed louder than she did over this drilling, okay? So he, you know, she was screaming loud, giving birth, but he screamed louder. So anyway, you have to be very, very careful. Yes, you do have to pay for stupid sometime. No, we didn't have a policy against that. After that, they wrote a policy that stated that you have to lay the part on the table to drill it, you know. So anyway, I'm sure he got quite the settlement. Now, working in manufacturing, has anybody ever worked in manufacturing? Do you think the guy ever came back to work? Yeah, you know, manufacturing people are kind of rough on other people. Yeah, the other guy's just, you know, he tried, but the other guy's kind of picked on him a little bit, so he didn't make it very long back. Poor guy. But anyway, so you want to make sure that you do have the safety policies in writing and enforce them. Does anybody ever work closely with your claims adjuster on claims? You guys talk with your claims adjusters? Oh, good, I see a few hands. Yeah, you want to talk with your claims adjusters on claims. I don't know how many times I get calls from employers and they go, I don't even know who my claims adjuster is, and it's 4 months into it. I'm like, have you talked to him? Well, I did once at the beginning. Okay, so you've never talked to him since? No. Well, that's not good. Okay, we need to make sure we have that open communication going with your claims adjuster. They're there to help you. Sometimes we get claims adjusters that are really kind of crummy. That doesn't happen very often, but occasionally it does. If it does, you know, talk with their supervisor and request a different one if you're just really having problems. For the most part, it's just a communication issue, and you can work it out, though. But you do want to make sure that you're working with your adjuster there, and you also know that this allows you to keep constant information about the work restrictions of the employee, because every time they go back to the doctor, they get a new update on what their work restrictions are. We need to know what those are, all right? So you want to make sure that you're constantly talking to them. And also, you'll know when the follow-up appointments are for the employee. You want to make sure they're keeping those appointments. And, you know, the employee may not communicate real well. How many's ever had an injured employee who didn't communicate real well? Yeah, I know, I'm shocked. Yeah, they do that from time to time. So you want to make sure you have that communication going with your employee, if you're an adjuster. Now, attorneys, they're a blessing, right? I love attorneys, especially the one who goes, injuries don't just no, not injuries, accidents don't just happen. They're somebody's fault, right? Does anybody ever just stub their toe? You know, whose fault is that? You know, it's your own. I hate to tell you that. Anyway, but I mean, I just like, why would you say that? That makes no sense. Accidents do just happen sometimes, okay? But anyway, but sometimes people will go and they will get an attorney. I know nobody's ever had an employee here get an attorney. You guys are going to be like, oh, we don't need this information. But they do, they go get an attorney there, and employers go, oh, they have an attorney. I can't talk to them anymore, right? No. As an employer, you can still talk with your employee, even though they have an attorney, okay? You can still ask them, how are you feeling? You know, what's the latest results from the doctor? When's your next appointment? Talk to your employee. You still have every right to talk to your employee, okay? You cannot say, I hear you have an attorney. What do you want? You want to ask that, I get it, but you can't do it, okay? So you can't do that. You can't ask your employee that. But you want to communicate with your employee because the adjuster can no longer directly communicate with the employee. The adjuster now has to go through the attorney. You're the contact with the employee, okay? So you want to make sure that you're still communicating there with the employee, communicating well. Nurse case managers, anybody know what the nurse case manager role is there? They're wonderful. Nurse case managers are really good. If you get a great one on there. And some of the attorneys will allow the nurse case manager to talk to the employee. So you just have to make sure that the nurse case manager reaches out to them. They should do that anyway. But the nurse case manager may be allowed to talk to the employee well, but they have to get permission from their attorney to do so. But you want to make sure that you are still talking to the employee. Post-accident misconduct. Has anybody ever had an employee come back to work and they think that just because they've had an injury, they can be a turd at work? Has anybody ever had that happen? Nobody. There's not one hand raised. You guys must have the most perfect employees ever. Well, we're going to address it just in case somebody didn't raise their hand. So you have an employee who is coming back to work and they're a stinker. In this case, you got the guy who's still in the photocopier there. But can you terminate them? Can you terminate their employment? Yeah, sure you can. You can let them go if they've come back to work and they're violating every rule possible. You know, they're coming back, you've offered them light duty, and they're coming back and they're doing light duty, but during that time, they are using foul language towards the supervisor, they're being rude, they're being belligerent, they're stealing, they're doing all sorts of things. Whatever the case may be, you do have to have very, very good documentation to back it up, okay? Because you want to make sure that you're not retaliating against them for having a work comp injury. But certainly, you can let them go for post-employee or post-accident misconduct. Sure you can, all right? Any questions on that? Anybody had a case where they've done that? They want to share with us? You want to share with us, anybody? Ah, what do you do? Good, good. So they had someone who was on light duty, created a hostile work environment, they documented it, and ended up terminating his employment. Absolutely, you can do so. You have every right to do so. You are not bound to this employee because some of these injuries take years to, go through the system and get it all, finalized. You're not bound to this employee for the next 3 years and have to put up with their crud just because they had an injury. If they're a stinker, you need to get rid of them, all right? You just have to document it very, very well and be very, very careful when you do it. how are settlements determined? I know people go, this person got this much money for that? Wow. Well, and that could be why you see like dad had a work comp settlement and you know Uncle John did and this person and you're shocked that you know your employee did as well. Well, it runs in their families. You ever heard that work comp runs in the family? Well, it could be because of the settlement at the end. Just not saying anything, but let's face it. All right. See this page here? It was just passed out later. See that one? Everybody got it? Everybody got it out? This is really kind of a cool page here. You can actually go online and find this. This isn't anything special. Don't let Connell tell you that. Connell will tell you it's special, but it's really online. Down at the bottom, it has the form number. It's WC-110, and it's on the Missouri Division Work Comp page. So, as you can see, every body part is rated for a dollar amount or amount of number of weeks that it's worth. So I've kind of done some simple math here for you. All right. If you have an employee who has injured their knee, okay, and they have injured their knee, they make $10 an hour, and they get a rating from the doctor's rating, okay, of 10% of the knee, okay? So the doctor says, yes, this person's injured their knee, it's pretty bad, they're going to get a 10% rating of the knee, all right? So you take that $10 an hour times 40 hours times 2/3 of their wages times 160 weeks, because that's what the knee is worth, and then take that times 10%. So a $10 an hour person at a 10% rating would get a $4,266 settlement for their knee. That's how it's all calculated there. I know everybody's going, this is way too difficult for this time of day. I get it. But that's how it's all calculated. Everything has a number there, and it's not just like subjective judgment there on the calculation, except for, remember those wonderful judges that I was telling you about earlier on Missouri judges that kind of do whatever they want? Well, the judge or the physician gives the physician rating. This is how much they deserve on a disability, okay? This is what the knee is rated, disability from this. So if I go in and my knee is injured, I would get the same rating who anybody else in here that was injured the knee the exact same way, okay? The physicians are varied. This is the way it gets rated. However, the judges give the occupational usage rating, okay? So give you a couple of examples here. I injure my knee. I'm a dancer down at Branson. I really can't dance. I have like 2 left feet. It's embarrassing, but let's not talk about that. So I'm a dancer down at Branson. I injure my knee, okay? That's the only thing I know in life is to dance, all right? Have no other skills whatsoever. I injure my knee. The judge will then look at the rating from the doctor and go, we're going to put on an additional rating because that's your employment, your occupational usage, okay? So they can add more to that, all right? Let's give an example there. Randall used the example the other day of a finger. If someone loses their thumb, okay? If I lose my thumb, my employer is going to go, great, you'll type a little slower, but get to work, all right? That's what they're going to do. But if I'm a guitar player, that's all I know is playing the guitar, right? Playing the guitar there, and I don't have a thumb anymore, that's probably going to create an occupational issue, right? So they're going to get a much higher rating than someone like me who may not use the thumb quite as often. If I lose my big toe in an injury, that happens. People don't wear their steel-toed shoes and they lose a big toe in an injury there. If it happens to me, I'll get some kind of settlement there. What if it happens to a ballet dancer? Right? The stage falls, she loses her toe in the middle of it. That's a problem, right? Ballet dancers uses their big toe a lot, probably more than I do. So they're going to get a bigger rating on that, a much, much bigger settlement on that than I would. Does that make sense of how the settlements are kind of determined there? And everybody's going, but this person got this much, and you know, and sometimes it's a ridiculous amount. They just have really good attorneys, okay? The new work comp statute came out. I can't remember when this came out now. When did this come out? 2013, 14? In what? 05. Basically, in Missouri, you can't discriminate or harass or let somebody go. You can't terminate. You can't treat them differently because they've had a work comp injury, okay? We can't fire them just because they've had a work comp injury. I get asked that a lot, can I please just fire them? I don't like them. They weren't working out anyway, and conveniently they had a work comp injury. Well, no, you can't fire them just because they've had a work comp injury. Yes, they did something really, really stupid, you know, and I get it, but can we fire them for it? No, we sure would like to, but we cannot. You can, however, let them go for post-injury misconduct. So document, 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 document. Had an employee, for a Branson employer here who worked for one of the theaters, okay? This employee worked for one of the theaters, and you know how the theaters have like the slope going down into the auditorium there? You guys know what I'm talking about. Some of you guys are the theaters here, okay. So you had the slope going down. The employee fell walking up the slope, okay? She fell so hard. I don't get this. But she fell so hard, she lunged into the wall and then ended up hurting her shoulder. She had to have major surgery on that, like shoulder replacement, because this is like the third work comp injury on that same shoulder. Yeah. Anyway, and then she also injured her hip. So she was really going for body as a whole type situation there. So we get her back to work. She ended up being just a real stinker at work, so we ended up firing her for that. But I kept saying to the adjuster, equal exposure, because she wasn't carrying anything, she wasn't doing anything, she was walking up an incline. But the adjuster was like, no, and I said, that's not equal exposure. Most people don't walk up and down hills, but have you been to Branson lately? Everything's on a hill. Randall made us park way down there around the corner. Anybody else had to park down there? Yes, that's the guy who made you do it. So everything in Branson's on a hill, right? So you're thinking, I was trying so hard to push for equal exposure there, but we ended up letting her go for post-injury misconduct there, but we didn't win the equal exposure part of it, but I was trying. All right. Okay, this is Randall's slide. I'm going to make him take it, and I'll read it off, and then Randall's going to answer the question on this, because we get asked this a lot, and I want to make sure that everybody understands. If an employee is injured during an event, 5K, run, walk, whatever the event is, it's sponsored by their employer, would the injury be considered workers' compensation? Can the employer require a waiver to be provided by the employee, participant, volunteer, if the event is not a job requirement, but the employee still wants to participate? And are volunteers covered under his work comp?
There's not a whole lot of things in the statute that have necessarily changed. They have actually tried to narrow down a little bit and specifically discuss it. But the key thing in any kind of company picnic, ironically, Connell Insurance, we're having a company picnic this afternoon, and we're inviting a lot of folks in from our insurance carriers, things like that, and all of our employees, spouses, and so forth. It's not necessarily a required event, but if we said, hey, somebody got injured and it was a voluntary event, what are some things that you think a judge would want to know before they really made that decision if it was actually a required event or not? Excuse me? Okay, perfect. Are they being paid? Did we make them clock out, come to the event? Did we pay them for it while they were there? What are some other things maybe? Okay, if they just volunteered to go, if they was a volunteer at it. What if we have about 45 employees and 44 of them showed up? Think the judge, they're probably going to look at that. They're going to say, hey, if you had 44 out of 45 people at your company event or at your company 5K that you sponsored or at a nonprofit organization that you volunteered for on Saturday, picking up along the highway for trash, things like that, if you have an extraordinarily large percentage of your folks at the event, obviously the judge is going to probably imply or think that you required people to be there. Now, if we have a company party with 45 employees and only 30 of them show up, or 35, obviously every judge is going to look at it different. There's no black and white number or percentage they're going to look at. But clearly, there are situations where you could have a company event, you could have a volunteer event. We at Connell Insurance, 2 or 3 of the big events that we do per year in Springfield, we participate in Rockin' Ribs. I think Rockin' Ribs is the single largest volunteer event in the Ozarks. Well over 20,000 people attend. We also do Sertoma Chili Cook-Off, probably 4,000 or 5,000. I was at both of those events, and we probably had maybe 10 out of 45, 15 out of 45 employees there. So clearly, that would be a situation where if someone was injured, they may or may not qualify for work comp. But the fewer number of people you have participating in a volunteer event is probably the main thing the judge is going to look at to decide if the employees were actually required to be there or not. But clearly, like Ted mentioned over here, if you're paying them to be there, yeah, they're clearly going to be considered as an employee or a work-related event. Can the employer require a waiver to be provided by the employee volunteer if the event is not a job requirement but the employee still wants to participate? Absolutely. If you're having a company event, or when I keep saying company event, if your company is participating, we have another big event come up, which is a Price Cutter Charity Championship held out. It's a golfing. They have a lot of different things. We also participate in that. We sponsor one of the teams for the Price Cutter. But with that, you can have people sign a waiver clearly that, to make sure it helps. It's not going to make it black and white. Again, the fact that you have 5 out of 45 or 40 out of 45, again, that more than anything you have them sign more than anything you post, more than anything you say, I think at the end of the day is going to be what the judge looks at. All right. So when you have a company event, it's very, very important. It's very, very important. A lot of people get injured at company events. Regardless of what goes on, good, bad, or indifferent, people are just a little different. I remember my first Christmas party with Connell Insurance. Connell is Irish. I'm not sure if you realize that. The name is Irish, and a couple of our employees were just kind of not here any longer. I guess would be the easiest way to say that. So anyway, things happen. Are volunteers covered under work comp? I used to use the term, there's no such thing as volunteer. The judges don't look at volunteers as volunteers. Judges look at it as unpaid employees. A lot of you, if you're a for-profit entity, you have no such thing as a volunteer. You have unpaid employees. If you're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, public entity, things like that, technically you could have volunteers. But here's the first and foremost the way a judge is going to look at volunteers. If you're a for-profit entity, again, you don't have any. If somebody is injured on your premises, doing something, helping you in any way, shape, form, or fashion, you're probably going to be held responsible for their injury. You should not, as a for-profit entity, have people performing work for you that are not being paid. It's just that simple. However, if you're a 501c3 and you have annual events, you have river cleanup, you have picking up trash along the side of the road, you have a thrift shop, you have a sheltered workshop, you have a multitude of different things, and you have volunteers that come in and volunteer for your entity, for your nonprofit, for your organization. The primary thing a judge is going to look at on those folks is, are they doing things that are in your usual course of business as your entity? If they're coming in on once a year, very infrequent type activity, maybe a once a year river cleanup, that would be considered normal volunteer work. It's very infrequent. It doesn't happen every day. It doesn't occur every day. But if you're a thrift shop, you're going to have people there every day. So even though somebody is volunteering, if it's something more in your usual course of work, something that you do in your regular duties as your entity, those people are going to be considered employees doing normal course of work. Now, the really confusing thing in the state of Missouri is the statute allows you to not carry work comp on volunteers. So if you're a nonprofit entity, you can choose, you can tell your insurance agent, i.e. Connell Insurance or whoever you're with, that yes or no, I want to or I don't want to cover my volunteers. And if you decide not to cover your volunteers under your work comp, you don't have to pay for the payroll and the premium associated with that payroll. On the other hand, if that person is injured, you're now self-insured on that person. You're self-insured, and you're going to have to pay for that injury out of your own pocket. You're going to have to pay medical bills, lost wages, everything as if that person was working for you and being paid. We have some firefighters, a lot of volunteer firefighter districts in southwest Missouri, pretty much all over Missouri. And the fact is, a lot of volunteer firefighters get injured on the job. Technically, they're volunteering, but they're not really volunteering because they're doing what normal, usual course of business for a volunteer fire department. So most volunteer fire departments do indeed include all volunteers. They work out whatever their arrangement with their insurance carrier. They can say, okay, volunteers, we're not paying them anything, but if they volunteer an average of 10 hours a week, a paid firefighter in the area makes, $20 an hour. So they're volunteering 5 or 10 hours a week. You can work up. Again, there's no black and white rules on this. It's simply between you and your insurance carrier. But you get to determine, with approval of your insurance carrier, how much your would-be wages were if you paid your volunteers. And you actually have to pay your insurance carrier a premium to cover those volunteers. So, again, very, very important to remember, in the world of work comp, unless it's a true, infrequent, unusual volunteer activity, you're probably going to be held responsible for people's injuries doing their usual course of work. Any questions on that? I know we have several nonprofit entities in here. Are there any questions on that? Any at all? All right. I think this is that your last slide?
Oh, yes, it was my last slide. I was going to say that, people think, oh, volunteers are fine. It's never going to happen to me. It's never going to be a problem. But however, one of our largest claims that we had happened with a nonprofit who had a volunteer who happened to be a physician. Remember that claim?
Yes.
Happened to be a physician there, and he was just riding his bike from one location to the other as part of his volunteer duties, and he hit a big pothole, I believe, or hump in the road. Something happened in the road there, a speed bump, something that stopped him. He fell forward on his bike, and he actually crushed his sternum, and he was off work for quite some time. It ended up being a very, very large claim, and it was a volunteer claim. So volunteers, you want to make sure they are covered properly and taken care of, and in this case, we're glad that they had insurance to be able to take care of him.
And luckily for that particular entity, they had elected to cover their volunteers under their work comp policy, so the insurance carrier paid it. But again, if they had not elected to cover volunteers, they would have had to pay for it out of their own pocket. All right. I think Sunny did a great job. Thank you very much, Sunny.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your help.